the hell did you rob a bank?
I think my subconscious mind just overrode my conscious mind and said, hey, badass, it's time to rob a bank.
No way.
Oh, yeah. I'm about to do something that's going to change the trajectory of my life forever. This is a do or die moment. Go.
Luke Lunkenheimer.
I think once a bank robber, always a bank robber. The best salespeople in the world have the most experience. You can't fight that.
What is it that makes people buy?
The simple answer is emotion. You raise a customer's dopamine level exponentially, they're euphoric and they will transact with you voluntarily because they love the way that you're making them feel. I was always the black sheep. I was the one that wanted to do big things. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a cowboy. I just wanted that really high value lifestyle. I suffered some injuries playing football. All right, well, scribble, scribble, tear. Go bring that to the village pharmacy. Okay, and that's when I was introduced to opiate pain medication.
Wow.
Like hydrocodone, Percocet, oxycodone. You're talking about just a terribly, just nefarious downward trajectory from some semblance of a normal human being to I've slept under bridges. Eventually you get to the point where sober moments are so painful because you just have nothing that you have to go out and you have to seek out the next high because you just can't live with normal. The biggest misconception about what it takes to be a great salesperson is that it takes someone to be a good talker. The best salesperson, Omar, is
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Passionate Few podcast. Today we have an incredible episode as we sit down with none other than Luke Lunkenheimer. Today he's going to share his incredible story about how he went to hell and back and what he's learned to help you maximize your life, your business, your income, and ultimately take it to the next level. So Luke, thanks so much for being on the show today.
very happy to be here, brother.
Absolutely, bro. I know it's been a long time coming from the East Coast. You're here today, so glad we got to make it happen.
Feeling is mutual, brother.
Absolutely. So before we get into your incredible story, man, I know you help people all over the world with sales training. I know it's your number one passion in life to help teach people how to persuade and influence. But before you became this like sales legend, right, helping people, take me back, man, because I know you had quite the story. I know from robbing banks to addiction to self-mastery. But before any of that stuff, take me back. Before the prison, the mindset, the level up, where'd you grow up? Where was Luke Lunkenheimer's story started?
Man, you make it sound so good. So I grew up in a little town called Cato, New York. So picture Syracuse, New York, which is best known for SU basketball. You know, you go about 30 minutes north, 20 minutes west, you get in this little one-horse town. I think we've graduated to a pizza shop now, a couple like convenience stores, a high school, and the big claim to fame is I believe in the past decade we've got a rubber running track and a flat football field versus the cinders and the hill that I ran and played on when I was a kid. So you're talking very small town. You know, for those of you who know what cow tipping is, this was an activity that we did in high school. We had tractor day. So I believe it was like 82 or 87 kids in my graduating class. Everybody knew everybody in every way possible. And if you ever seen the movie Varsity Blues, the West Canyon Coyotes, picture a little bit smaller school and less people, but just as intensely in love with football and the same type of athlete that if you can throw a football, you can get away with murder. So that's kind of where I came from.
And when you grew up, did you have ambitions to do stuff outside of that small community? Did you want to do big things? Did that come later, or take me back?
So, bro, that was my cross to bear, right? And that's kind of the burden of my tale is that I was always the black sheep. I was the one that wanted to do big things. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a cowboy. I wanted to be, you know, my father was in the car business, so there was a part of me that wanted to own car dealerships, but there was also a part of me that wanted to be a professional football player, wanted to be a professional race car driver, wanted to be a professional bull rider. I mean, whatever I saw on that little square box that shows all the colors that had an antenna on it back when I was a kid, anything that I saw that looked like people revered that person and their talent or their ability was highly valued and that society would love them for it, that's who I wanted to be. So I always had that flame burning at a very young age.
What drove that? Was it a girl that didn't like you back? You wanted to be the man? Was it validation from mom and pops?
I think
where did that start?
It was intrinsic from the beginning. You know, I look back as far as I can and I can't pinpoint it. I can tell you what it evolved into later on. It was certainly, you know, I wanted validation from the kids at school. We lived in a very gossipy ecosystem. You know, there were very clearly an upper caste and a lower caste in our town. And because my dad did decent, you know, he made reasonable money, but we drove a brand new car because he worked for a car dealership. We were seen as, you know, nice house, white picket fence, Ford Mustang convertible, we must have a few dollars. So I was able to eke myself into kind of that upper middle class bracket, but really I was just a skinny pimple-faced kid that was trying to fit in. So high school on up, you know, really middle school on up, it was validation. But I remember back even before before that, man. I just wanted that really high value lifestyle, and I think it just came from really being in the confines of this little one-horse town. I knew there was other things out there, and I wanted to experience it. And I believed that the conduit to get there was financial success, obviously, and I wanted to do so in a fun way. So that's where the professional athlete stuff came in.
And where did your first forays into that start? Like, was it in high school where you start going, like, I want to make some money, trying entrepreneurial hustles, athleticism? Like what are you? How are you starting to manifest, take action on becoming a somebody?
Athleticism, 100%. Because in Cato, New York, they don't teach entrepreneurship. I didn't even know what that word meant until I was in my mid-20s, man.
Right.
When I say one-horse town, brother, I mean the high points of my high school career were when we glued pieces of wood together to make cantilever arms in tech class to see who could hold the most weight. The heroes in Cato, New York were the football players, the weightlifters. I mean, I remember we had a guy, his name was Josh Warner, and he went on to get a Division II football scholarship. And man, he was just the talk of the town for a decade. So if it gives you some perspective. So it was athletics really at that point, because it was all I knew.
Yeah. And then where does entrepreneurship come in, or any of that come in, that transition from athleticism to, I know addiction became a part of your life, but walk me through how you go from being an athlete in momentum to then ultimately how you start turning that into cash with side hustles, your first job, et cetera, in sales.
So I can tell you a vivid memory of my father bringing a vehicle home on a tow dolly, just a little, single axle pull behind trailer that you strap a car to. And it was a trade-in that they had taken in on trade at the dealership that he worked at. And I'm like, what's that? Is that Vanessa's car, my sister, for when she turned 16? He goes, no, we're gonna flip it. It's a yard car. I was like, a yard car? We would just drive it around the yard. He goes, no, son, we're going to clean it up. We're going to put it in the front yard, and we're going to put it for sale. I said, okay, well, what's that do for us? He goes, we're going to make money. I said, how we do that? He goes, because I bought it for $200. We're going to clean it up. We're going to spend a couple $100 on cleaning it, maybe doing some brakes and tires, and then we're going to put it out front for $1,000. And bro, you may as well have backhanded me. It was just like, wait a minute. What, that we're not going to have to punch a clock and count how many hours it takes to get to $500-600 worth of profit. We can just take this asset, polish it, and sell it, and get this major windfall. Obviously, these are not the words of an 8-year-old kid, but I'm paraphrasing. And I remember being astonished that you could bring this car home, and I can see my dad's ass crack hang out of his jeans while he was vacuuming the floors, and then he grabs a thing of Kiwi white men's shoe polish, that they used to use back in the 80s for tennis shoes, and he wrote like $9.95 across the windshield, slammed it in the front yard, and brother, it wasn't 2 or 3 days. I was watching some guy peel off $100 bills for his daughter's first car, and I was addicted to the hustle from that point.
Yeah, and then you learned the power of value. You learned it wasn't about work, it was about bringing value to that work and then communicating that value. Wow.
To an extent, but it was really more about that you could find an asset, because the value proposition came later, but at this point I was really seeing that you could go find an asset that was undervalued. As long as you had an eye for it and as long as you knew your space, you could refine that asset or recondition that asset and then either repurpose it or resell it and make a significant amount of money. And that, to me, that kind of just injected into my veins a goal of entrepreneurship, in that I was going to flip cars. It was sexy. You went and spent a few $100, you polished it up. You still had the laborious hard work and the bloody knuckles, but the windfall was much greater. The payoff was much greater.
And then, so do you flip your first car shortly thereafter, a couple of years later, or what happened?
So I was teased with entrepreneurship, but then slapped back in the face with the dollar per hour or the wage rate, because what my dad did was he put a list of tasks on the refrigerator: wash the car, wheel acid, scrub the white walls, clean the engine, vacuum the interior, chamois it dry, $25. And what that did is it helped me understand that you could perform a service and get a fixed dollar amount rather than having to punch a clock and work and trade your time for dollars. So I will say that at that juncture, my dad gave me the opportunity to prove my worth and get a decent paycheck for doing it. So, but my idea was, okay, I'll get the car, I'll clean it, I'll get it out the door. And then I was going like this, like, where's the paycheck and where's the next car? And my father was like, that took 3 hours. It takes a professional reconditioning guy 8 hours or a day and a half. Like, how'd you do that? And I'm like, find the imperfection, man. It's clean. And it was at that point that I realized efficiency paid off.
And then at that point, do you start thinking like, how do I start doing more of this? The reason I ask is because I used to actually wash cars, and then I washed the neighbors' cars, and so I would also, buy like chocolate bars, go to my neighbors, sell them for $1. Unless I knew they had money, I'd sell the chocolate bars for $2. So I started local hustles that way as well. Did you do any of that at that time?
Man, I see a lot of people that are kind of fake gurus, and they bite right onto that and latch on. Oh yeah, man, I was selling Boy Scout popcorn tins for double the money. I was not, man. I wasn't that guy. I can tell you that I didn't have the mental grasp of entrepreneurship because it hadn't been introduced to me. Nobody was doing this. It wasn't, it's kind of like, man, you go to a certain part of the world and they don't have internet, right? And then you bring your kids over there and they're like, well, where's your tablet? Let's play Fortnite, And they're like, what are you even talking about? And the child can't fathom, how do you not know what online gaming is? Well, when you have no online, you're not going to know what online gaming is. For me, it was when there's no entrepreneurs, when there's nobody doing any sort of entrepreneurial activity or any hustle, the dad with the used car thing, that was all I had access to. So it wasn't upon me to figure that puzzle out myself. It was something that came later, and when I saw it, I latched onto it and realized that I had that skill intrinsically. But at that juncture, man, no, for me it was just, okay, I'm going to flip more stuff, really. I'd love to say it wasn't.
And then where did the addiction come into place?
Yeah, man, so the whole, varsity blues thing, when you play football for Cato, New York, you get certain liberties, right? You're not expected to adhere to the same societal guidelines. So I suffered some injuries playing football, and I was a key player on the team. And, the local doctor, you go see him, you have a concussion, but he still clears you. And it's like, well, man, I don't think I can play. He's like, well, coach says you have to play. I can hardly walk on my foot. All right, well, scribble, tear. Go bring that to the village pharmacy. Within an hour or two, you'll feel better. Okay, and that's when I was introduced to opiate pain medication. And, it progresses from there. It goes from that to a taste and an understanding. I can tell you there were times that I was in school and I was given an excuse that if he's passed out drooling on his desk, it's okay. He's resting up and he's medicated. He needs to play in the homecoming game, And
so you were enabled and given a privileged position to get away with that type of
110%, man. And I can tell you that what that did was it sowed a seed that there was a chemical escape. You later find out there's all these different moving parts, right? There's attention deficit and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which we later find out that I have to an extent. And what you find out and you discover is that that's a lack of natural dopamine production. So the people that have that type of disorder, they seek dopamine. That's why a lot of people with ADD are on the Red Bull Extreme paragliding circuit, or they're racing cars, or they're skydiving, because they're seeking that dopamine rush that everybody else is getting from menial day-to-day activities. They smell a beautiful flower, they pet a cute little dog, they get a little bit of dopamine. We don't get that. So at a young age, I was injected with a chemical that numbed me emotionally, got rid of the thought that my parents were getting divorced and that my sister was going off to college and that there was all these other negative things going on in my life. And it mellowed me out, it leveled me out. I could focus, I could concentrate, and I could ultimately find peace and enjoyment in the same things that normal people found peace and enjoyment in by taking this pill. So high school ends, we move on from there. I'm not using drugs at that point, but I'm very quickly, within a matter of months, reintroduce them when I get working in the car business.
And what are the drugs you taking at this time?
Opiate pain medication, so hydrocodone, Percocet, oxycodone, that type of thing. I was prescribed, I think at one time I took kind of a previous inventory of what I was prescribed when I was in high school, just from recollection. And I can tell you more than 10 occasions within my junior and senior year, more than 10 occasions where I was prescribed copious amounts of narcotic pain medication. And so were other guys on the team. It was like, what'd you get? I got hydrocodones. What'd you get? I got Percodan. Oh, dude, those are awesome. Can I trade you 2 of these for one of those? This is in high school football, man. It was crazy.
And then when you start going into the dealerships, are you, you start working, are you functional? When you're taking this stuff?
So when I
perform well?
It's funny that you ask because it augmented my performance. So there's a certain kind of societal awkwardness or a social anxiety that I think everybody has. Until I kind of unearthed my gift of gab, if you will, and understood that I had a natural propensity and talent for talking to people, I was still, somewhat self-conscious and low self-esteem going to talk to customers. And it wasn't until probably halfway through my first year in the business that I was reintroduced to opiates by a friend recreationally. And, went out, had a few beers, took a few pills. The next morning I'm hungover as hell. And he's like, dude, just take a couple pills, it'll go away. So I take 3 or 4 hydrocodones, hangover's gone, I got the talkies, I got energy, I have a great selling day, and from that point on, it was off to the races.
You were hooked at that point.
Oh my God, yeah. Physically and mentally, man. Opiates are tremendously physically addictive, like inescapable.
And then first question I have to ask is, how the hell did you rob a bank?
So that's a lot further down the road. So if you could take a step back, if we're looking at a timeline, okay, 0 to 10, relatively normal lifestyle, 10 to 18, from 13 to 18, man, you're talking about the introduction of alcohol on a daily basis between the age of 12 and 13 from my father, which loved the guy to death, but we've all made our mistakes. The introduction of opiate narcotics from the local doctor, field parties, keg stands, whoever can drink the most beer and shots is the man, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time I leave school, I'm in this landscape of whoever can do the most and get the most messed up is the man. And, naturally that was myself. I was very competitive, and I, of course, needed that validation. So whatever I could do to be in the spotlight, I did. And in Cato, New York in high school, if you could, funnel 6 beers at once and snort a line of Coke and 3 Oxycontins, and you were the man.
And win the game on the weekend.
And win the game on the weekends, although we didn't win a lot of games. Go figure. And that's funny, man. We had bad coaching. We had like 3 guys that went first team all state, and we went like 2 for 12 or 2 and 12 or something like that.
But in your mind, you were winning the Super Bowls
every day, man. When you're that high and that drunk, I mean, I used to drink Coors before I even went into school. I would smoke a Camel Wide, drink a few beers before I even walked into school. It just gives you an understanding. So the bank robbery, man, to your question, fast forward now, so that 0 to 10, okay, 10 to 20, it's starting to get really bad. 20 to 30, you're talking about just a terribly just nefarious downward trajectory from some semblance of a normal human being to, I've slept under bridges, I've found cardboard dumpsters and set little fires in them to stay warm in the winter after leaving the bar and having nowhere to go. I've couch surfed.
How old were you when things were that
early
bad?
20s, early to mid 20s,
Wow.
and it got worse when I got up towards 30. I would go through these ups and downs, and it was really relative to emotional pain, just all different types of losses. I just started to kind of get better, and then I lost my best friend to a motorcycle accident. He was slaughtered. His body was just severed, and I had to watch him die. That was pretty traumatic. And
You were there when it happened?
I was not there when it happened. I got the call. I was the first to the hospital, and I was there when he took his last breath and was actually, with his parents and everything. And it's, at the time, you're this young testosterone-filled badass, and you're like, man, he died, that sucks. You all have a cry, and you just keep it moving. But you don't understand what that does to you mentally at that stage of the game, below the radar, where you have to later go on and dig up once you sober up and find out that there's all these past traumas that you've dealt with.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the bank robbery comes in where you're 30 years old, or 29, I believe, and your last relationship or a semblance of a relationship is on the way out. You've burned every bridge. Dad won't answer the phone. Mom is nowhere to be found. Sister is nowhere to be found. There's just nothing. I mean, imagine every immediate family member, every extended family member, every friend, every relative, every old teacher. I mean, I could go on forever. Anybody you can reach out and touch with a phone call that provides you any sort of emotional assistance, friendship, familial benefit, anything like that, just not accessible, because you've burnt every single bridge. Now, it makes me sound like a very malicious actor, but you have to remember this is a decade where this has transpired. So over the course of 10 years, asking to borrow a few bucks, letting people down, saying you're gonna be there for Christmas when you're not, all these things. Eventually you get to the point where sober moments are so painful because you just have nothing that you have to go out and you have to seek out the next high because you just can't live with normal, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it was April, I believe, April 14th or 15th in 2019, I think it was.
Before this, were you working at the dealerships making money throughout this up and down time in the 20s up to 30?
So every dealership I worked at, I very quickly became top performer and then managed to screw it up. So I'd come in like a whirlwind. What's the truth?
Yeah.
I would come in like a whirlwind, man. I would have my shit together. I would be the straight A student. And then I had this thing where I would get this sense of entitlement. Like, I came in, I showed you who Luke Lunkenheimer was. I smashed everybody's records. I controlled the board and I controlled the game for months. Now it's time for me to lay back and party a little bit. Get me an assistant.
Yeah,
that was the attitude I had.
So you get to the top of the mountain and then you self-sabotage subconsciously. Yeah. You want to party.
Couldn't have framed it better myself. Self-sabotage is the word. I was the king of self-sabotage.
Hey guys, we'll get right back to this video in a sec, but first, I have a quick question for you. Given that the e-commerce industry is growing by the trillions year over year, have you ever dreamed of owning your own e-commerce business like many of the guests we've had on the show, but maybe you feel stuck on how to start? Well, if so, you're not alone. The truth is, starting and setting up your own online store can be incredibly time-consuming, complicated, and get expensive. Not to mention the hassle of researching top products and staying on top of market trends that make you money. Lucky for you, that's where today's sponsor, StoreBuild.ai, comes in. With StoreBuild.ai, you instantly get a free custom-built, AI-driven store loaded with 20 winning products and a custom theme that can help you generate sales. All you need to do is head to StoreBuild.ai, enter your info, then simply sign up to Shopify for free, choose your store's look and feel, and voila! They'll send you your custom-built store ready to generate sales. The whole process is lightning fast. Whether you're just starting out or want to grow, StoreBuild.ai makes launching an online store easier than ever. So why wait? Visit StoreBuild.ai and in less than 5 minutes, you could have the e-commerce business you've always dreamed of. Thanks to StoreBuild.ai for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back to the show.
No, I can relate to that. I used to work at Tesla. That was the last job I ever had.
Yeah.
And I always did well in sales, always everything. But the problem is when you're the guy, now everyone, it's okay when you're late. It's okay if you're a little off. It's okay. And so you start getting enabled because you can perform and you go, well, as long as I can perform, anything goes. Problem is that those habits show up in other areas of life. And there's a great line that says you can ignore the facts, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring the facts. Sooner or later, they show up.
That's 100% accurate,
So
man.
they showed up.
A living example of that, bro. It was something where I had this deep-rooted sense of, no self-worth or lack of self-worth, and I would go in and prove myself, get the validation, all the attaboys, get that spike in dopamine, that validation that I needed, and then it was like, okay, well, everybody knows I'm good. It was like I had to show everybody that I'm the man. Like you heard I was the man, I'm the man, you saw me do it, now I'm gonna take a break. Because maintaining that level of sales and success is incredibly difficult work, right? So I was under the mindset that if I just went in and crushed it for a little while and showed these people who I was, I would get the entitlements that come with it, and it's exactly what happened. But 3 months of crushing it and then 1 month of screwing up becomes 2 months of screwing up. Once you have, once the justice tables equal out, it's like, all right, man, you either got to perform or get the hell out of here. And then when they would come down on me, it was like, well, screw you, don't you know who I am? And you're like, yeah, you're that great has-been. Anyways, have a nice day.
Yeah.
And after those moments, it was like, okay, well, I'm going to go celebrate this loss with booze and cocaine and a night out.
Wow. So then you find yourself in your late 20s, now so desperate, nobody's picking up your calls, that you go, maybe I should hit the bank, maybe that's the only way out. And obviously I was listening to a bunch of your podcasts. It wasn't like you were after the money for the sake of money per se, correct me if I'm wrong. It was more about feeding the addiction at that point, right? Paying rent, and it was a survival thing more than it was an abundance thing, so to speak.
You couldn't be more accurate, and it was survival is the perfect word. It's so suitable because when you're addicted to opiates, it is such a physical addiction that when you withdraw, it's not just like, when a crackhead's like, man, I need a fix, right? I need to escape reality. You literally have physical symptoms that are just, they're unbearable. They really are. One thing I will say is there's, I've got some people in this world that I don't care for, but I would never wish opiate withdrawal on my worst enemy. It's just something, there's only been one time in my life where I've considered ending it, and I've never even gotten close to be, I don't want the world thinking that I'm this suicidal, maniacal nut. Yeah. But, when you have nothing, when you're in physical pain, when you're just at the end of your rope, that thought goes through your head. I'm probably too much of a narcissist to ever do that, but you certainly go well, what else is there? Yeah. And when you can be somebody who had as much, ego as I did, and even that thought flickers in your head, it helps you understand how bad that physical withdrawal is. So what was going on is, I was dropping my girlfriend off at work. I was using her card to go door to door and sell legal subscriptions and pocket the cash, of course, because this was the beginning of my criminality, or at least it was actually laid into it at that point. And while she was at work, I would go door to door, make a few scores, steal some stuff, pawn some stuff, get some money together, get some drugs, go get her, go home, and give her a few bucks for rent. This was life.
And she was unaware of all this.
She chose not to speak about it. Whether I don't want to discredit her and say she was completely naive. There was a lot of things she didn't know about, but it's certainly, she wasn't ignorant to the fact.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask, don't tell. If he looks like he's withdrawn, get a few Percocets out of my dad's safe. Yeah. And dad'll enable. You just tell him that his favorite, son-in-law Luke is in a hard spot, and he'll toss you a few Percocets. So I was very enabled. I was very enabled, and but I got to the point where there were just certain hammers that were about to fall that were really going to disrupt my reality even more than it was. There was court cases that were coming. There were AUOs that were coming. I was bound to be arrested under warrant within a matter of days. So it was like, all right, what's the solution here? And the solution consciously was rob a bank. I've always thought it was sexy. I've always thought it was cool. I never considered it because it was never a feasible reality. But when you're living where I'm living, it's all of a sudden something you're contemplating. If I rob this bank, and I, to this day I speak about this, and this I believe was the subconscious calculation that if I get the bank score and I get the money, I'm going to take the money, I'm going to go move to a different state, I'm going to go to rehab, clean up, reinvent myself, and then come back a new man, right?
Yeah.
Hit the reset button. But if I get caught, I'm going to be forced into confinement. I'm going to be in a cage. I'll have to sweat these drugs out of my body because I didn't have the willpower to do that. I had tried many times. And it was, I think my subconscious mind just overrode my conscious mind and said, hey, badass, it's time to rob a bank. And it was literally a decision that was made in a matter of hours. Kind of cruised around, cased a few banks, did a little research online, went home, got the clothes, went to the store, stole a bandana and some sunglasses, and within 15 minutes I was knocking over a bank.
So the idea to rob a bank literally happened that day?
Yeah, so I can't tell you the thought didn't cross my mind previous to that.
Yeah, I'm sure it crosses all of our minds.
Dude, I think any young buck, has the thought of being Billy Badass like Ben Affleck from The Town and Jeremy Renner and going and robbing a bank. It looks sexy, right? Daniel Ocean and Brad Pitt knocking over the casino. But what I did was certainly nowhere near as sexy or as glorious as that. But there's that.
29 at that time?
Yeah.
Walk me through what's going on the second you walk in and you're like, holy shit, I'm actually going to do this. Like,
so
what's going through your mind when you're about to rob a bank at 29?
It's a great question, man. So it all seems like a great idea until your hands push on that metal bar that opens the door and it feels like it weighs about 300 pounds.
Yeah.
But now you're on camera, you're in this getup. It's very clear what your intentions are. This is pre-COVID. No one's wearing N95 face masks at this time. So you look awkward.
What year is this?
This is in 2019, I believe. No, excuse me. 2009. No, 19. Jesus Christ. 14. Thank
14,
you.
yes.
Sorry about that. Chronology is not my strong suit, obviously.
Yes.
But long story short, man, you got this lead door that you're trying to push open, and it's almost like it won't go. And it's because there's this chemical going through your body, cortisol, and you're in this moment of this could be the end or the beginning. I'm not sure how to feel, but I'm about to do something that's going to change the trajectory of my life forever. This is a do or die moment. Go. And it just hits and you go. And all of a sudden you have this surge of adrenaline and dopamine. I'll tell you this, Omar, if I could get away with it and nobody was emotionally scarred, tellers and patrons and so on and so forth, I'd rob a bank every day because there's no such thing as a high like knocking over a financial institution, man. It's incredible, okay?
Yeah.
But back to reality, there's so many ripple effects that are involved that it's, obviously I'm saying that in a
right.
fantasy way, but so you're in this bank and you've got, security guard unarmed, you've got patrons, you've got the tellers, and you're like, I need to take charge of this situation. You can't just walk in as the bank robber and stand in line and wait your turn, right? You have to control the whole situation.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe this wasn't a great idea. I have no crowd control. I have no weapon. I have no plan. I'm just here, better ask for the money. So I'll never forget, man, and I'll paraphrase this. This is damn near a quote. I said, it's pretty obvious based on my attire what I'm here to do. Put the money out on the counter, no tracers, no die packs, no sequential bills. I don't want any banded money or anything from the vault. Just fan out the day's take on the table. I'm gonna grab it, I'm gonna be out of your hair. Everybody's going home. Mm-hmm. And then nobody moved. And you're just stricken with panic. Like, are they laughing at me? Do they not know I have a gun? Mm-hmm. Like, did they see me coming? Do they know? Like, every thought that's negative goes through your head.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I just found, it's like, when the puppy finds his bark, I just looked at the tellers and I said, move. And then they started moving. And in that moment, it's like, okay, the gears are turning, the ball is rolling, we're robbing a bank.
And they start taking out cash?
Yeah, they start taking out the money, man. Just like following my every order in sequence, doing exactly what I said. And I kind of pep talked them on the way through. I'm like, listen, guys, don't hate me, hate the game. This is federally insured money. No one's getting hurt here. You're all going home today. You're all going to see your family. Let's get me out of here quickly. I don't want your money, because the third teller was starting to move. And
like John Dillinger, I want the bank's money, not yours.
Not your money, yeah. And I just pulled out a plastic grocery bag, stuffed it full of cash, threw it in my hoodie, and it would have been a perfect bank robbery visually. And you can go see this whole thing on the internet. There's a video
on camera?
of it. Oh, 1000% from 3 different angles, because they couldn't find me. So they ended up releasing all the CCTV footage to the entire Central New York on all the news networks trying to track me down. And yeah, man, I got all the money and I turned around and it would have been a perfect robbery, except I forgot there was a velvet rope behind me. So, but I was a big enough guy. I walked through it, it came unclipped, and it fell over. But it just, for suave, it was probably one thing I wish didn't happen. But we got out clean, man.
So before you go in, like, are you pep talking yourself? Did you do anything to get high? Did you pop a pill?
I had nothing. That's why I did it. I was not high. Everybody thinks that I was high as a kite going into this bank as a crazed drug fiend lunatic. No, I was a dope fiend that was in need of a fix, that was physically withdrawing, and I knew there was one guy in town that had a few pills left because it was incredibly dry, and dry by way of there was not a lot of drugs around. It's kind of the drug vernacular, right? So I that's part of the reason it played into me robbing the bank, is I needed a copious amount of money in order to get the last few ducats of pills that this guy had, and that was what I was after, was the fix, because I was withdrawing. I was very sick. That's why I remember the bank robbery so vividly, as it was as sober as I've been in a long time.
Wow. How much cash did you get?
$9,812 or something like that. It was just shy of 10 grand.
And you walk out the front door?
The back door.
The back door.
So I had parked a car about 3 blocks over, and when I had kind of egressed the bank, I walked into this kind of like wooded area, and I thought I had a little bit. I had dress clothes on underneath my sweatsuit, so I went into the wooded area and kind of traversed the rocks and stuff. 3 blocks down, came out dressed as a businessman, got in my car and pulled away and left.
So you literally got a wardrobe, set up, parked the car 3 blocks out. So it was essentially, you thought of it the day of, but you premeditated the whole thing the day of.
The day of, within an hour of actually entering the bank, let's say maybe 2 hours to be more realistic. I wasn't clocking myself, but it would have had to have been. I was casing the street, looking at a few different banks, deciding, and of course I was subconsciously ruling them all out. Now, this one's got too much security. That one's, got no traffic flow in and out. This one isn't a good place to try to run away from. Yeah. This one's too close to the state troopers, until I finally got to the point where it was like, well, shit, this one's perfect. I almost called myself out, like, bro, you're not really doing this if you're not doing this one, because this one's perfect. And it was, and it proved to be. I went home, which was like 6 blocks away. I robbed a bank that was within a half a mile of my residence at that time. When I went in, that's when the thought occurred to me, well, if I get away with this, I'm gonna have to try to make myself look not like the guy that robbed the bank, which is why I threw on the collared shirt and the dress pants underneath the sweats.
So you walk out the back door, go to the car, change the outfit, drive off.
100%.
And then what happens next?
I drive away. I drive up in a southbound direction towards the city of Syracuse. I come back northbound because I wanted to be seen going both ways.
What's adrenaline going through your body?
Heart is bouncing off your rib cage. The amount of adrenaline that's going through your body is very difficult to think. It's very difficult to keep the car even between the lines. It's like, when I was younger, I had smoked pot a few times, and you're in this state of paranoia where everything is surreal and normal functions and motor skills are very difficult to execute. Same thing, but turned up. Instead of -10, it's positive 10,000 with your adrenaline. Yeah. And, I make it up the road, I make it back. On my way back down the road, now the cops are flying by me. One passes me this way, one passes me that way. Everyone that starts to approach me, I'm waiting for it to pull over behind me, but nothing, man. Probably passed 3 or 4 law enforcement officers that were moving towards the bank. If I was heading away, they were going this way. When I was coming back towards the bank, I remember 2 of them came from behind me and overtook the automobile. I was sure they were going to come up behind me.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the door like unlatched, and I had the car ready to throw and park and run, and they just went right by me, kept on. And I had to pick up my girlfriend at work, and she was at the Holiday Inn directly across from the state trooper barracks. That was an interesting trip.
And she had no idea?
Not a clue.
And you never told her anything? She gets in the car, what happens? You're just
I get in the car, and she's asking me why I'm all sweaty and wearing Timberland boots with dress clothes. So just don't worry about it. I think I told her I did a line of cocaine or something. I don't remember what the conversation was, but she was not impressed. But when we got home and I gave her the money to get us caught up on rent and pay us a month ahead, all of a sudden her concerns about the situation went away, strangely enough.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the foundation of our relationship at that point.
And then it starts being on the news, you said? It was...
Yeah, so that was, I think, on a Monday, and you can fact check this, it's been a long time, I don't choose to relive it often, but It was probably 5 days later, 4 or 5 days later, I kept seeing myself on the news. My father actually texted me, rob any good banks lately? He knew it was me from early on.
No way.
Oh yeah, 100%. Haven't heard from my dad in a long time. All of a sudden he's asking me if I robbed a bank. Why? Well, because the bank 3 blocks from your house got robbed by a guy that just looks just like you and has the same damn sweatshirt. It's like, no, Pop, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm shopping for canned goods at Tops. What are you talking about?
So are you living in anxiety like all those 5 days? Or
I'm so high those 5 days because I have $10,000 disposable cash. I'm buying up every pill, every bag of cocaine there is, and I'm just staying blitzkrieged out of my mind from 7 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night every single day.
And you're seeing yourself on the news and all that? Wow.
Having, seeing it on the news, and I'm kind of like not wanting to pay attention because I'm not wanting to feed into that because at this point I believe I've gotten away with it, but I'm also trying to be that intelligent criminal like, Quentin Tarantino and George Clooney and From Dusk Till Dawn, watching the news, seeing how close they are, what information are they giving the general public, and it was nothing. They truly had nothing.
So you're living in like this movie, pseudo fantasy reality, rock bottom, rock star at the same time.
100%, bro. It was pretty crazy.
Okay, so then what happens 5 days later?
So 5 days later, at this juncture, I decide to do a smart thing, which is go to the DMV, take the last of my spoils of victory, if you will, and get my license back, because I'm a car salesman by trade, and I finally walk myself through the logic of, dumbass, you've got a handful of cash. The reason that you haven't been able to sell cars is because you haven't had a driver's license. This cash will get your scoffs paid, will get you back with a temporary license, and then you can go make more money, and you can actually have an semblance of a life again. Like, this is your entry point, go. So I go to the DMV, I pay this stuff off, and I didn't think it was gonna happen. I thought there was just too much floating out there, but I managed to get, by a mistake of the DMV, get my interim driver's license back, and they were getting ready to send me my real driver's license in the mail, and I'm on my way home from the DMV. We stop at the laundromat to pick up the laundry that we put in when we went to the DMV, fold it, on the way home, and I remember, now that I look back, I remember seeing all these vehicles, an Impala with a short antenna, a Tahoe with blacked out windows, a Ford Taurus with a short antenna, and they were plaguing me. And it was like, I'm like, dude, you're giving yourself a panic episode. I was running low on drugs, I'm sobering up, these things have been here all along. It's 5 days in, they would have got you by now, right? And we pull in the driveway, go to hit the trunk release to get the laundry out, and all of a sudden, just the crush of gravel underneath, tires all around us.
Man.
Yeah. Doors open, prone in between the door, guns out, the whole 9 yards. Are you Luke Lunkenheimer? And then I went on some wise ass tangent of, no, and if you think it's me, why don't you know it's me? And breaking their balls a little bit, because I knew I was going down, but that was the end of it, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude. And then you end up doing how much time for that?
Believe it or not, brother, I only did just over, collectively, just shy of 2 years, but just that one stint, just over a year.
Wow. Yeah, it was 23 months, I believe. I read.
Collectively, between the county time and the state time.
Hey guys, quick question. Have you been enjoying this video, but you're thinking to yourself, man, I love this content, but I want to learn how to grow my brand or my business? Well, if your answer is yes, you're not alone. In fact, millions of entrepreneurs deal with this exact same issue. And it's something that I've learned the answer to from interviewing 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs around the world. And this philosophy that solves all that is a concept called who, not how. Now, the who, not how philosophy states that anytime you're stuck on the hows to get to the next level in your life, your brand, or your business, that there's always a who to help you get there. And it's for this exact reason that I'm super excited to announce that I've officially launched our brand new Passionate Few community to help you do exactly that. And yes, it's 100% free. Join me and the thousands of other entrepreneurs that can help you make your life, your business, and your dreams a reality. With no further ado, let's get back to the video.
And then walk me through the transformation that occurs once you're locked up. Because I know that's, in doing a lot of interviews and research with you, I see that ends up, people say, there's a good expression. One of my clients and buddies, Amir, he says, you meet your best self in your worst times. Mm-hmm. And so you get locked up and you go through a reinvention of sorts inside. Walk me through what happens there.
So the reinvention didn't come until sobriety came. Mm-hmm. And truth be told, when I first got into county, I was going through ruthless opiate withdrawals. Mm-hmm. And there is a medication called Suboxone that people use to taper off of opiates. Some people use it for opiate maintenance, assistance if they've been on drugs for a long time. And a little angel showed up, man. There was a porter that was cleaning the hallway outside of my cell, and he saw me writhing in pain and just, vomiting on myself and all this stuff. And he throws a little baggie through the door, and it was one Suboxone strip, which for those of you out there that have experience with opiates, you know that you can take that and use it to taper off of opiates. And it was, my addiction was so strong that one strip wouldn't do it. If a doctor were to prescribe the taper, it would be multiples, but it was just enough to take the edge off to where I could actually walk to mess to get the food, where I could actually walk to the basketball court to get fresh air. It was almost like something from above, man, gave me just enough and was like, listen, I'm gonna give you just enough to be successful. Mm-hmm. If you're smart and you don't F this up, you're gonna be okay. Mm-hmm. But if you try to take it all at once, you try to catch a buzz, you try to sell it for drugs, you're gonna be right back where you started. And it was in that moment, and it probably was because I was confined and I didn't have other options, because I've always been somebody who can solve on my own, that I was like, this is all I got. This is a sign, if ever there was one, and I'm not an overly religious person. I believe in doing the right thing, and I believe in treating people how you want to be treated, and I believe in integrity. But in that moment, some sort of faith component came into play. Like there's something here providing me assistance. So I used it to taper. I ended up, still in a lot of pain, still in, writhing in withdrawals. And there's a withdrawal period that comes after the Suboxone as well. It's nothing compared to what it would have been if it was just completely cold turkey. So that right there was kind of the ramp up to having some sort of understanding that things might be okay. And if I just so I did the right thing, I made that last, I tapered as correctly as I could. That led to befriending a CO, getting a transfer to Jamesville from the Justice Center, which meant a much nicer place, grass to walk on, other people I knew. And it just, brother, what it was is it was a series of good decisions that just kept feeding into other better scenarios that required me to face greater challenges and harder decisions. But if I made those good decisions, it created greater benefits. And it turned me into a believer. Mind you, you're talking about a guy that was raised by wolves. My life was nothing that would teach anybody or push anybody towards the thought that if you do the right thing, good things will come to you. Quite the opposite. Every force in my life told me steal, rob, drink, snort, escape, no integrity. Just get away from it and manipulate your way through it. But it was something was finally showing me that with a north pointing moral compass and actually doing the right thing, that tree bears fruit.
So was there a day where you said, fuck, I need to change my life, or was it a series of gradual iterations and good decisions?
It was a series of gradual iterations and good decisions. What it was perpetual successes. I had never experienced perpetual successes.
That compound, yeah.
Compounding, things that fed into each other. I had never witnessed that because I'd never had any positive movement in my life by way of, making good decisions or any sort of financial success. It was always just rise, fall, bad decision, good decision, or rather win, fall, bad decision, even worse, placement. But this was something where I was actually seeing that if you're a good person, you make the right decisions and you're morally conscious, that it creates positive ripple effects that end up coming back to you, which I had heard my whole life and been told by everybody, but it had never proven itself for me. Quite the opposite, actually. Anybody who would have lived my life, Omar, would have said, I understand why he went bad, and I'm making no excuses. I burned bridges, I was nefarious, I was a bad actor, I deserved what I got. But I can tell you as a point of fact, sitting here in this chair today, if you went back and watched my life as a movie, you'd look at your friend and say, well, shit, I get it. You know what I mean? There was nothing about my upbringing, my existence, that would have put any faith in any sort of greater good. I discovered it on my own when I was incarcerated.
And personal development, where does that come into play? Where you start reading books and personal development, like actually, investing the time? Is that in prison because you're locked up? Or
so I'm in jail and I start reading books in the law library because I don't have any commissary, I have nobody supporting me. The only recreation I have is I can go to the law library where people research. I'm a sentenced inmate. People go there to research their cases and try to win their cases and help their lawyers and stuff. I just went there for entertainment, started reading law books. And I started to see that there were little caveats in laws that you could circumvent to actually do things that would, allow you to be productive. I started reading business law and I started seeing, business law, procedural law. I started seeing that there were ways to outsmart the system and create gain for yourself. And it wasn't about the information and executing upon it, more so the idea that if I educate myself and I grasp the information, I can position myself and leverage gain off of this information. So then I start getting into prison, I get sentenced, I get access to books and media, then I start self-educating and note-taking and iterating and sketching what would eventually be my entrepreneurial future.
And then are there dates before you get into, before you kind of become a free man again and you go back into the workforce and sort of reinvent yourself, are there moments in there where you swear to yourself like, man, when I'm out, I'm going to change it, man, when I'm out? Like, is there a lot of that building up inside of you? Was there that fire? Or what's the conversation going through your mind when I get out, I'm going to do X? Like, what was going through your mind?
Omar, imagine the excitement of being somebody who's never had hope, who's never thought that there's good things to come. If I put a positive action plan in place, I can actually create wealth and success for myself. More so, imagine being a guy who for an entire decade, vast majority of your adult life, you've been addicted to drugs, physically and mentally, and thought that the rest of your life was just stealing, copping drugs, like you concede to that being your existence and you just mentally check out and that's gonna be what it is. Now imagine somebody gives you a spark of hope. You're incarcerated, you're behind bars. All of a sudden, you're not 180, you're 205. All of a sudden, you don't look like a sickly drug addict. People in the visit rooms are telling you you're starting to look like something. You got six-pack abs, your vocabulary is coming back, your business acumen is growing, you're starting to progress and every day is getting better and you're starting to make contacts in the outside world. Letters are starting to come in. It's like things are starting to take a positive turn. You are a coiled spring. And absolutely, yes, sir. When those gates open, the world better look the heck out because I'm coming.
Mm-hmm. And you get out, what happens?
So I get out and...
Do you remember the first day when you literally walked out?
Absolutely. I walked down the hill and it was anxious. It was anxiety because not until you cross that line are you actually free. Then once you cross the line, I had been released from incarceration before into the hands of state troopers, custody at another facility. Like the last time I got released from jail, I got picked up on another warrant and sent right back to jail.
What were those charges for?
That was aggravated unlicensed operation, petty larceny, and obstructing governmental administration. Yeah. Just being an asshole, really.
It's so wild to me because you seem so sensible, so thoughtful. At that time, was there any inner conflict when you were doing all these things where you felt like was there a conscious active in you that you were like suppressing and numbing, or was it not even there because the drugs were the dominant voice?
That's why I use drugs, is because that voice was speaking up every day. And I could suppress it by taking the narcotics and drinking and getting high. Yeah, it was there, man. I had morals. I knew what was right and what was wrong. But you coat anything with enough glaze of narcotics and you can numb any instinct to do good. Imagine if I were to sit here and you and I were to go shot for shot and I was drinking water and you were drinking Patron and you didn't know it. We get an hour into this podcast and 6 or 7 shots in. Are they going to get Omar? Are they going to get you, your business acumen, your quick wit, your your candor? Are they going to get that, or are they going to get a drunken shit show? I mean, the answer is obviously rhetorical, but that's my existence for that entire time period. So when you live that for long enough, you don't want to enter society normally. You want to just stay the derelict and stay medicated and hide out and live in a cave.
Yeah. So you get out and you finally have a chance to reinvent yourself. The floodgates open, and then your first day in, what do you do?
So, bro, it's like a crazy dichotomy, right? Part of you wants to be this successful animal and go take on the world, and then the other of you is so ashamed to even show your face because you've gone through this entire year, more than a year-long process of reclaiming yourself and self-correction and vindication, but the world knows you to be that same derelict that got put away for bank robbery a year ago. So it's a major bet. Imagine you've gone through the battle of your life, withdrawing off of opiates, re-educating yourself, reacclimating yourself to normal life, working up the courage to go re-enter society, and at the precipice of all that is another locked door, which is the gate to societal acceptance, when you now have to go prove yourself to all these people. So it's like a major victory followed by a Super Bowl that you got to play and try to win to get a ring. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I imagine it's probably the way somebody feels after they win a divisional championship and then have to go on to try to win a national championship. It's like, we just won the whole league. Now we got to try to win the world.
Level.
So life became my Super Bowl, and I was going to go get my ring, but it was a hell of a challenge in front of me.
And you go into sales right away? Do you go back? You get back into the car business right away?
So when I talk about the dichotomy, there's part of me that wants to go take on the world, and there's the other part of me that's saying, no, man, that desire for greatness, that flame that burned within you, burned into a structure fire. I mean, it's something that at that juncture I'm looking at as this desire to be successful has been my downfall. Quiet that voice. Go make $80,000 a year, get a white picket fence, a Labrador, a good girl, and some kids, and just enjoy life. Maybe dad was right. Maybe middle management, just below ownership, company car, and 80 grand a year is the life to live. Maybe when you're at the top of the ladder, if the shit hits the fan, it gets all over you. That's what happened to me. Maybe dad was right. So I concede to this thought process, and I go work for a collision center. I answer a regular help wanted ad just like anybody else, and I go to this collision center and I start learning how to be a collision estimator for 15-20 bucks an hour. Lo and behold, somebody comes in to buy a detail package from one of their salespeople, and I overhear it, and it's going terribly. So I take the reins and sell the person a detail, plus upsell them to rust proofing, plus find a dent in their car in the parking lot and contract them to fix the dent, and bring an $8,000 sale through the door off of what would have been an $80 detail. And the owner's like, what the hell just happened? Within a matter of 2 weeks, he's telling me he's training me to go take over one of his failing stores north of where we were located. And all of a sudden I was, within 14 days, I'm being told I'm going to get $1 million location and run it, for a couple $100,000 a year.
Wow.
So this happens in 2 weeks. And then once I get given this information that not only am I going to be able to stay out of sales, I'm going to be in management, upper level management, actually an executive level, and make potentially $250,000 a year. It's immediately followed by him calling me into his office saying, "Did you rob a bank?" Yes, I can't employ you. Sam, look at my job application. You asked me if I had any criminal charges. I said, yes, robbery third. That's bank robbery. Oh, I didn't notice that. Yeah. Dude, I can't employ you. You got to get out of here. And he's teary-eyed handing me a check like, dude, you got to go. Yeah. I had high hopes for you. So now imagine that you've just kind of gotten over the hump and you're starting to experience success and you have hope in front of you. All these other times where you started to realize success and you got stomped out. Not this time. This time I'm going to be okay. This time it's coming quickly. It's coming because of hard work and genuine discipline and no drug involvement. This is the ticket. And then your past comes back to haunt you. Your flame is stomped out. You're kicked back on the Central bus to head back home to your apartment. And I was devastated.
Oh my God.
But I will say this, that renewed sense of faith kicked in. Immediately after that, an individual reached out to me and, hey, I heard you got fired from the collision center job. I want to give you my checkbook, my dealer plate, and my trailer out in Oswego, and I want you to go flip cars for me. We'll split whatever the take is. And that was the initial offer from somebody for me to partner with them in an entrepreneurial venture that ended up going terribly wrong. He robbed me for about $40,000 after I grew his company to levels I don't even want to talk about. Inside of 11 months, he screwed the whole thing up, and that's a whole nother tale. But it came with him seeing how successful I was and wanting to enter that ecosystem and be a part of it and be able to say that his name was on it too, instead of just saying his 9-to-5 job and doing what he was doing and collecting a check. He wanted some of the spotlight as well, and he ended up screwing it all up and took me for some money and put me right back on my feet again. So that was round number 2, man.
Yeah. So then round number 3, what do you do?
A guy reaches out to me, an old friend of the family and a local business owner, somebody who I had actually been fired from initially before I went to jail for theft of services. I was running a store for him, and I was cleaning one of my drug dealer's trucks in trade for pills, got found out and got fired. But he's a man of God. He's a good man. His life is kind of built on second chances, so he wanted to pay that forward. And he offered me a position that I had with his company previously that was a mid-6-figure position. And he's like, listen, man, I know you're better. Your dad tells me you're doing good. I've seen what you're doing. You're keeping your nose clean. You look great. Would you like your job back? To which he got a very enthusiastic yes from me, and I went back to work for him.
Wow.
That stemmed into what became CNY Drives. So I go back to work for this guy.
And what's CNY Drives for people who may not know?
CNY Drives are the 3 used car dealerships that I own in the central New York area. They're inexpensive cars, subprime focused. They're really hubs to facilitate subprime financing and help people get cars. Part of that was kind of a virtuous desire to help people. So I was given an opportunity. I wanted to help give others an opportunity. I have a strength in special finance, getting deals approved, negotiating with banks. And I also felt that would be a good niche to operate in because there was nobody really doing that in our locale that also practiced good customer service. It was kind of the shade tree dealers that did that kind of business. So I kind of wanted to create this environment where people felt like they could get a good car, they could trust the people they were working with, it presented professionally and clean, and there were waters in the cooler, and the bathroom was clean, and they were spoken to in a professional manner, but they could have bad credit and still get treated like a human being. Right. So CNY Drives came from that same individual employing me, and one day coming into me and being like, Luke, before you worked for me, when you worked for me before, you were my number 1 sales guy by light years. You're still my number 1 sales guy, but you're obviously doing just enough to feed your ego and stay number 1. Like, you can do so much more than this. What's going on? And I just explained to him I had a taste of entrepreneurship and being my own boss and flipping cars and with this other guy, and it really messed with me because I was doing very well. I mean, bro, when you're getting handed $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 checks every week after you've lived for a $500 paycheck for a long time, it's like you have a future. Success could be, and I didn't really get into that, but to backtrack a touch. In that time, working in wholesaling and retailing for him, I was making, I believe I made us each $160,000 in 11 months or something like that. Wow. So I was cranking, right? And I had freedom. I drove around when I want. I employed a salesperson. I was living like a business owner, and I got a taste of that life. And so although I was given an opportunity to make 6 figures and live a good life and do the white picket fence thing, which I'd swore I was going to do, I had been bit by the entrepreneurial bug, and I saw what was possible with your own efforts in your own little bubble, doing what you know how to do and executing upon your talents. And I was not depressed, but I was certainly let down because it was too good to be true. You want to talk about doing the right thing, man? I just continued to do the right thing, and even feeling down and downtrodden and like the world had failed me once again, I just still opened doors for old ladies. I still wiped the seat after I used the bathroom. I still just lived by that regimented life that I was living in prison and trying to do the right thing. And wouldn't you know, about 2 days later, he comes into me and says, that car thing that you did with, what's his name? Yeah, that was profitable. Yeah, it was very profitable. How much money did you guys need to get that started? And I told him. What was your rent at the building that you used? And I told him. And what was the percentage split that you guys used? And I told him. The following day, he comes back into my office and he has penciled an offer that is 5% more to my benefit, okay? The rent is half of what it was at the other place, and the capital amount is 3 times what it was at the other place. And I said, what is this? He goes, the X in the line is where you sign if you want to partner with me and open a car dealership. You do well, you buy me out in 4 years, it belongs to you, the loan's paid back, and you're a businessman. You fuck up, you owe me 150 grand.
Wow. Wow, dude. And how old are you at this time?
30.
Wow. So you literally turn your life around in one opportunity like that after a series of shit opportunities and shit circumstances. You keep going.
10 years later, we scaled that company in 4 years to 2 dealerships, opening the 3rd in 2020 when I bought him out. And we've done nothing but grow it since then. Now it has a CEO, it has management that runs it, and I've opened Paid to Persuade because, well, I learned over time that I was a mediocre car dealer, but I was one hell of a sales trainer.
Now, switching gears to that is fascinating because for a lot of people that don't know, Paid to Persuade is your proprietary program.
Yes.
You teach a phenomenal sales training program. I've had the privilege to sit down with some of the most established names, in sales. So I love the stuff you talk about, especially because, in a world where there's a lot of charlatans or people have you play different roles, you're big on authenticity, right? And I think the 3 C's were, I think it was confidence, content, and cadence. I believe those are the 3 C's you have. And you talk like a lot about like just an awareness of, for example, I know there's like the 3 core questions. Like your frameworks for sales are incredible, but it's obviously something you've learned through just so much trial, error, iteration. I want to ask, were you a natural salesperson early on, or was how much of it was nature versus nurture?
So what I teach and I profess in Paid to Persuade is nurtured. Nature gave me the ability to sell. Before I kind of underwent my transformation into a good human being, I was a natural born salesman. My senior superlative in the yearbook was biggest schmoozer. And they took schmoozer to replace the word bullshitter. The superlative was biggest bullshitter. I was known for my ability to talk myself in or out of whatever situation I so chose. I was able to traverse my entire life by simply manipulating people into doing whatever I wanted. Omar, I remember a time where I convinced a drug dealer that I owed $200 to front me drugs because I was sick, and as long as he would get me unsick, I could then take his car, go to the store, boost a bunch of DVDs, take him to the pawn shop, get the money so I could come back, pay him what I owed him, and then give him a little extra to cover the debt and buy some more drugs. And as I went to leave, I talked him into giving me $20 for gas. So I walked in owing him $200 for drugs. I walked out with his car, $20 in cash, and a handful of drugs. And that was my gift. But I used it for malicious reasons in the early part of my life career, whatever you want to call it. Post jail and the reinvention period, I decided to see if it was possible to maintain a high level of success. And just to give you some context, bro, I thought my gift was the bullshit. I thought my gift was the fact that I was a wolf and that I could talk the little old lady wearing the white gloves with a tomato allergy into buying the ketchup popsicle and eating it in front of me on a hot summer day for more money than she had in her purse and taking out credit, right? That was what I believed was my gift. But I later learned that it was my ability to speak and communicate authentically and understand where a human being was coming from and engage in a discourse that was compassionate and paid homage to their needs and their desires, but very frankly communicate with them that there's a process that needs to transact here where I earn a commission for selling you a product, but if we can simply arrange it where I just take you down the path that you would already like to go and I optimize for efficiency, you're going to enjoy the process and I'm actually going to be considered a friend by the time we're done. And when they buy into that process, I'm able to monetize at maximum efficacy and do so efficiently so I can then go take more customers in a shorter time period and maximize for profit. So nature versus nurture, The first half was nature when I was a bullshit artist. The second half, which has become Paid to Persuade, is trial, error, iteration, and eventually coming to the realization that sales is not who is the best talker. It's not about who can speak the best one-liner. You know, I see these sales trainers today that have these 1 million to 2 million people following them. I see these bombastic social media reels. I see these one-line microphone drops where all they're literally doing is solving for one objection and then acting like they've sold, when in reality we all know they just need to move through the rest of the objections. And it plagues me, it pains me. And I don't mean to go off on a tangent here, but this is why I created Paid to Persuade, because I looked at the landscape of selling and sales trainers, and I said, if this is the best that the world has to offer the salespeople of the world needs Paid to Persuade. And that's what it became. I like the way it sounded. It's the reality of the situation. You get paid to persuade.
And what is Paid to Persuade for people listening who want to learn about sales or get training? Like, what is it exactly?
Paid to Persuade, not to sound over dramatic, but it's salvation for the salespeople of the world, man. It's most salespeople, when I say most, I mean all. And the only ones that tell you this isn't the case are the ones that aren't willing to admit it out loud. Go into a transaction hopeful. Hopeful that what they're going to say is going to get the job done. Hopeful that the individual that they're going to speak is going to mesh well with them. And hopeful that they're going to monetize that sale. Nobody goes into that communication knowing that they're going to close the deal. What Paid to Persuade does is it breaks down the process of selling into a very simple framework, and you put it quite nicely and concisely, and I appreciate your kind words. It simplifies selling into a very simple framework, man. It's human beings love three, right? Marketing is based in the rule of three. The law of three, the fact that it's just enough information where it seems diverse enough to solve a problem, not so little that it's singular or only two pieces, that it's actually complex, but simple in the fact that it's three things that are the easiest thing for the human mind to remember. That's why it's small, medium, large, chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. We can go on for days about the rule of three, but everybody knows that if we just need to know that I got to find out what brought you here today, I got to find out what your buying power is, and I got to find out what you hope to accomplish, and several of those have substrata that are also groups of three. Trying to find out if someone's credit worthy is very simply the three types of financing. There's all these little substrata off the original big three that allow a human being to say, okay, I'm going to talk to this customer and I just got to solve these three things. I got to ask these three questions. And if I ask the question, and that's really the difference, man, is that these other sales trainings, they literally they'll give you a book of questions to ask. So you ask that question, you get the answer. What if the answer isn't optimized for what you need? What if it's not actually the answer that you need? What if it doesn't solve the problem? Well, then what do? Go back to your black book of questions and just scan pages until you find the next one? I never understood how an individual could look at that and say, oh yeah, by golly, that's going to solve my sales dilemma right there. I'll just bring this book along with me and I'll flip back and forth like Alex Trebek hopping categories in Jeopardy. It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is we empower the salesperson with a level of confidence that's completely unparalleled. When you go into a selling situation and you know that you're going to solve it, because very simple, Omar, we just have to start with this. What brought you here today? And for my cold callers, my high ticket closers, my door knockers, that just means pitch. Okay, why are we still talking? You heard me say my little quick one-liner that got me to be able to sit here and stand in front of you still, but why are we still talking? What's the need? Something I said interests you. Let's develop that interest and let's let that flower bloom, right? Then from there, it's very simply establishing the buying power. At what level can you engage? And let's solve for that at the outset, so we don't take somebody for a test drive on an $80,000 automobile, only to find out that they're looking for a $350 payment. And to my car salespeople of the world, every one of them's done it. Every veteran is guilty of it. They get this mindset that they've prejudged and they believe this person is credit worthy, and they've even asked them, hey, do you have good credit? Yes, I do. I've got excellent credit. And they later find out when the customer is a 783 credit score, but it's because they have zero balance on their $350 Capital One card that they've only had for 4 months, and the bureau's given them a 783, that person doesn't qualify for that $80,000 car. That person wasn't lying to you when they said they had excellent credit, because when they open their iPhone and they check Credit Karma tells them they're excellent. And that goes with something that we say in Paid to Persuade: understand that they don't understand. Every good salesman, every elite level salesman breaks everything down into absolute brass tacks before they advance the sale at all, because they need to make sure you understand what's going on, right? Understand that they don't understand means that we have to overexplain everything and optimize for overexplaining. I had somebody ask me, would you prefer someone underexplain or overexplain? I'm going to explain until you tell me to stop. What happens there, Omar? If we're talking about cars, okay, and we're talking about an electric motor that you're not very educated about, and I start talking to you about the brushes, I start talking to you about the fact that it's more efficient than an internal combustion motor, I start talking to you about the fact that there's very minimal maintenance. If you already know this stuff, what do you get to do? You get to stop me. Yeah. Oh no, man, I already know that. Oh look, your dopamine goes up. Your ability to be sold to increases when your dopamine spikes. So there's nothing negative that happens there if I'm giving you information that you already have. You get to elevate your status. You get to tell me that you already know that. You get to raise your status, raise your dopamine, and become more saleable. People love to tell you that they know something. Now what happens if you didn't know? What if I underexplain? What if you don't know that the fuel economy is better and I say something towards the end of the sale, like, and you already know that you're going to save 30, 40 bucks a month in gas, so we're good. Now all of a sudden there's implied ignorance.
Yeah, there's doubt, there's
worry, there's doubt. I'm not sure. You said something that I can't really align with. What else did you say that I don't understand? What happens then? No problem. I like what you're saying, but I need to think about it. Because a human being is not going to divulge to you the fact that they don't know. No one wants to tell you they're ignorant. No one wants to say, you know what, Omar, you said this thing and it seemed like by the way you said it that everybody else in the world knows this, but apparently me. So apparently I'm a dummy. Could you explain that? Human beings don't do that, okay? Yeah. What Paid to Persuade does, man, is it takes every aspect of the human condition and it optimizes it for a financial transaction in a way that the salesperson can flow easily by every piece of the framework and know for a fact that if I solve this, I can move to here. If I don't solve this, I can't move to here. Yeah. So until we get past this point, I need to continue to iterate and ask questions. Oh, I got my nugget. Now we can move to here. Yeah. And then once you get to here, you're solved. It's a non-objectionable close. You've solved for every objection at the outset of the conversation. The person cannot object. You transact.
I love that, and it's fascinating too because salespeople are it's the highest paid profession on earth, right? Salespeople are the highest paid people on earth.
100%.
This stuff's so important, and it's interesting because the way you frame it, it's almost like, you know, obviously we'll use a metaphor here, but like, let's say for example, when you ask the questions of the objections that people usually wait till the end of a call, they kind of end up being like bullets, like you're collecting bullets. So then every time you collect a bullet, you're shooting down objections, and you're literally just essentially pre-sourcing their reservations, elegantly addressing them in advance. So the only question is, you know, for lack of a better expression, where do I sign?
100%.
You know, so that way you save your time as a salesperson, and you don't have to also be in your head, because a lot of times, how many times the salespeople, you know, they spend half an hour, 2 hours. But in the back of your mind, you can't be present because you're like, is this guy going to close? Or they? So if you address that up front, you know, it gives you permission, so to speak, for the rest of that interaction to be worthwhile.
You're 100% accurate, man.
Yeah.
And something I want to call out there as well, you said something that's incredibly important. When a salesperson isn't 100% sure, they continue to go to the back of their mind. You know what that does? That breaks the frequency of authenticity. A customer can tell when you're disengaging and you're going through a thought process and then you're coming back forward to your prefrontal cortex and you're executing in the conversation. They can sense that. Even if they're not educated in it, they can sense it, and it breaks the frequency of authenticity, and they will disengage fractionally, right? That's why word tracks and one-liners and black books of questions are not optimizing a salesperson's efficacy. They're never going to make the best salesperson. No one's going to reach their potential when they're reaching to the back of their head looking for a one-liner in the middle of a heated discussion about something that is a financial pain point for a customer and that they're looking for you to help them solve. Something else that you said was you've got that gun, right? And you're shooting down objections. I like that reference, but let's look at it this way. What if I have a Louisville Slugger and we're getting ready to engage in battle, but you have the gun and it's got 10 bullets in it, and those bullets are objections, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to tickle your chin, I'm going to make you feel good, I'm going to pull out the clip, and one by one I'm just going to thumb every one of those bullets out of the gun. I'm going to hand you back your piece, I'm going to put it in your holster when you knew nothing happened, and then when it gets to the end and you pull and go, I'm going to go, and it's over.
Yeah, well said. What's the biggest misconception most people have about what it takes to be a great salesperson?
The biggest misconception about what it takes to be a great salesperson is that it takes someone to be a good talker. That the best salesperson has the silver tongue. The best salesperson has the gift of gab. The best salesperson, Omar, is the best compassionate interrogator. The person who can put a line of questioning in front of a customer that makes them feel desired, that makes them feel important, that makes them want to engage in self-talk, which also raises dopamine. One of the things in P2P, and if anybody knows about dopamine, it's yours truly. When you raise a customer's dopamine level exponentially from where they're used to operating, they're euphoric and they will transact with you voluntarily because they love the way that you're making them feel.
For you, would you say, like, when people come into training, because I'm sure there's men and women all over the country, different industries, there's a lot of people, for me, I know I started in door-to-door. So I knocked doors in solar, and then I later moved to Tesla. But I was a top performer in solar. But I remember when I started, man, I was so nervous because it was 100% commission. I sold solar door-to-door in the hot heat. People don't want you there. And I'm knocking on doors selling $30,000 solar systems for people to save on their $200 bill, for electricity. Man. So it's tough, and the people are hiding in the thing, and you know what I mean? And you hear people bullshitting, and people pull guns. I've seen all the crazy shit knocking doors. But I also know that I've had a lot of salespeople and men and women who didn't have any experience in sales. Some end up doing phenomenally well, but some people crash and burn their first year, or they can't deal with the pressure or the judgment or the commission or it's just because a lot of it is in your head. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you seen from training, all these people all over the country in sales that ends up being the biggest catalyst for people to transform the identity from, I can't sell, I don't want to be pushy, I'm not a salesperson, to, hey, I can be good at this, I can be world class. What are the shifts usually that you've seen that people make that allow them to become great salespeople when originally they don't feel like they are?
Let's talk about what you just brought up. Let's talk about door-to-door, which is part of the reason that you're as successful as you are today. You're intelligent, you've got wit, you've got all of it, but that door-to-door background, that ability to face adversity and be told no 1,000 times just to look for that one yes, that built a leather skin on you that optimized you to be able to enter big business and take a no and still push to a yes and do so romantically, okay? Let's talk about the door-to-door salesperson. You want to be an effective door-to-door salesperson, stop trying to close every door that you knock. Yeah. Look at statistics. Understand the arena with which you operate. And this feeds into your question about what are some things that we find people in sales that allow them to get that confidence and move forward. Understanding the landscape of which you travel. Now, if the statistics on door knocking are 1 in every 10 doors is going to open, 1 out of every 10 doors that opens is going to actually converse, and then 1 out of every 10 doors is going to close, that means you need to go to 30 or 40 doors before you even sell something, right? So now if I know the national average is 30 to 40 doors before I even sell something, if I'm getting 20 no's to get my yes, I'm doing twice as good as the national average. I am a kick-ass salesperson. All of a sudden, no doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I want no. Give me 19 no's, baby, because that 20th yes is going to put me twice as far ahead as the rest of the salespeople. So if you're not educated in the ecosystem by which you live, it's very easily to get in a mind funk. It's very easily to get in that sales dilemma where I don't really know if I'm doing well. I don't know if I'm actually executing and improving. I don't know because I have no metric to gauge it by. Anybody who works for an organization that doesn't measure their metrics down to the cent or the penny or the minute on the phone conversation is doing their salesperson a tremendous disservice. That's something that we teach in our B2B in the Paid to Persuade platform, is that you have to measure these statistics, because if you don't know the metrics that your salespeople are operating in, number one, how can you measure success? And number two, how can you let them know they're doing a good job? Their paycheck? What if they're blowing through 5,000 ups to get that one good paycheck? Is that what you want? You got to know the metrics.
And when do you think is the right time for someone, say in a transaction, to actually walk away from a sale and say, hey, you know what, it doesn't make sense, versus push through to keep trying to make it make sense, or to keep understanding from them, right? Because there is a certain fine line where you go, you know what, overall this isn't worth it. Where would you say, from your perspective, that line is for salespeople?
Omar, I would tell you it's not a fine line. It's a line drawn by a double thick black Sharpie across the white hardwood floor. Because in Paid to Persuade, when you observe the big three, it's all based in the human condition. There are triggers and there are logical gates in human conversation that if you cannot get past a certain point, you can send a stimulus in. And it's a stimulus that's proven in scientific studies end over end, time and time again, to be statistically true, that you impose, and if it doesn't solve, there is no deal. So what we've done in Paid to Persuade is we've given you these psychological triggers. We've given you these little things to implement, and if they don't solve and get you over the barrier into the next step, there is no deal there. Get out, optimize for efficiency, move on to the next customer. Would you like an example?
Sure.
So for instance, one of the things that I tell car salespeople, right, it's a very light touch shopping experience. There's a lot of tire kickers, there's a lot of people moving about the car lot that are going to engage in conversation but might not be in any way, shape, or form capable, interested, or in any other way ready to engage in buying an automobile, right? So let's say you have a one-legged up, what we call the wife that needs the husband or the husband that needs the wife, right? You can issue a time gate, and again, I'm going to go very surface level here. It's much, much deeper than this, so to the audience, don't scrutinize, but this is a very light example of what we're talking about. Okay, if you're coming in to look at an automobile, are you married?
No.
No. So let's pretend that you are for a moment.
Sure.
And your wife likes to be a part of the conversation, but ultimately it's your decision. Okay? You come in, you're looking at a pickup truck. And I say to you, okay, Omar, we got the pickup truck. We're having a sales conversation. I've solved for what brought you here today. I've established your buying power. I've asked you what you hope to accomplish today. And you said, well, you know, I'd like to look at a few trucks, maybe test drive, get some figures, and then go home and talk to my wife. Now we've solved for the fact that the wife objection is here. We haven't gone on a test drive. We haven't gone through a Foursquare. We haven't pulled a credit app. We've been in conversation for 5 minutes and I've already solved for one of the deal-breaking objections. Now I can issue a time gate. As a human being, if there's any chance that you're going to engage today, if I told you that if you bought today, that I could save you potentially 20 to 30% on that pickup truck, but it had to happen today. And I made it believable and I credited it with logical information and it was true and it was authentic and you believed it to be true. Would you still need to go home and talk to your wife?
No.
The answer is of course not, because you're a human being and that's the same answer that every human being is going to get. To the 99th percentile, there's always an outlier, right? This is logic and it's psychology. But by issuing that time gate, hey Omar, we have 3 groups of pricing at CNY Drives. One is our everyday low prices, one is our circular specials, and one is our hot list deals. Those hot list deals, believe it or not, every once in a while one comes across where a customer can engage, get a tremendous discount because we're optimizing for getting a vehicle off our floor plan. We've got a vehicle that was a trade-in that's going to go to auction, but if somebody decides to buy it retail, we can give a tremendous discount, whatever that situation may be. And those deals, Omar, those actually get customers a discount as much as 20. I've even seen 30%. I've seen people walk away paying 2/3 of what they would normally pay for an automobile when they engage in one of those hot list deals. I'd like to show you our vehicles today. Which of the 3 price categories would you like to see? And then you're going to explain them a little more thoroughly what each of them are, and you're going to give, just little, proofs. And then you're going to say to me, if you can potentially engage, which in this situation, you're the guy that, that wants to pay homage to the wife, but you can engage without her, you're going to say, well, I'd like to see all 3. I mean, right? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure.
Would you, as a consumer, probably want to see all 3 price points?
Sure.
Okay. And then when I tell you, okay, but Omar, you did hear me say that those hot list deals, those were something that are good for today only, and you're not going to get those if you come back tomorrow. The reason we go over this now, Omar, is because if you go test drive a truck and you fall in love with it, and I've shown it to you because I know it's a tremendous deal and you're going to walk away with a huge amount of savings, but then I say something like, well, Omar, you can only get this deal today. Are you going to see me as a credible salesperson? Are you going to think that I'm a nice guy telling you the truth? Or are you going to think I'm just trying to get your business today?
Right, exactly.
It's rhetorical, right? But Omar, if I bring it up now and I share it with you, it puts the ball in your court. You get to make the decision. If you don't want to go down that road today, we don't go down that road today. You're going to tell me, no, man, because in the back of your mind, you know what I don't know and what I don't need to know, which is whether or not you can engage without the wife. Now, if you can't, if your wife is the type of person that if you come home with a bank contract and a purchase agreement, she's going to divorce you, and I tell you about those three groups of pricing, what are you going to say when I ask you which ones you want to look at?
Well, let me call my wife and ask her, or let me wait for my wife to come back, or whatever it is. Yeah.
Let me see the first 2. I don't want to see the hot list deals. And then I'm going to say, those are the greatest discounts. You don't want to see those. Is that because there's no way in, hell's half acre that you could even potentially do business today? You're going to tell me, no, man, I got a wife. She's got to be a part of it. I'm not getting divorced today. It's not going to happen. Boom.
Yeah, you've sourced the truth right up front. Yeah.
And brother, when you give that financial incentive, and that's the key, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Well, I'll just tell them that there's a special deal. No, you have to give a financial incentive that makes a person feel ignorant if they walk away from it. It has to be constructed. It requires management to validate it. You can't just tell lies, right? But when you create that financial gate, that customer goes, they make the decision for you. You no longer have to get to the end of the sale and have the cute one-liner, but well, does your wife really wear the pants? And does your wife want you to be better or worse? Does she want you to be confident or less confident? Wouldn't you be more confident behind the wheel of the pickup truck? See, your wife wants you in the truck. It's some logical trap bullshit. It solves for the objection at the outset using facts and common sense to where I now know if you can engage or not. If you can't, politely show you a few things, kick you, and I optimize for follow-up, and I'm still very kind to you, but I get your name, your number, and I go through the nurture sequence. Or if you say yes, dude, I immediately know there's a deal. If you've told me I need to talk to my wife, but I want to see those hot list deals, I don't need to speak to my wife potentially, I can engage. We're going right to the right truck and we're making a deal immediately and optimizing for time.
Yeah, and you make it collaborative when you do that. I love that. Let me ask you this last question as it relates to sales in particular and a transaction in particular. In short, what is it that makes people buy, right? Because say we're in an interaction, and this goes, I know you train, people in all sorts of different industries, but whether it's, coaching, cars, automobile, literally any industry with sales, there's always a point in the customer's mind or potential customer's mind where they're thinking, should I not? Where is that moment? What is occurring the moment someone goes, I'm going to buy? Like, I'm sure after, millions of dollars in sales, you've seen that process. You've almost seen the switch go off in people's mind at this stage. So what is it occurring when someone goes, you know what, in spite of the doubts or the thoughts, I'm going to go? What's that final latch that occurs in the subconscious or conscious mind for most buyers?
So there's two parts to that answer. Okay, the simple answer is emotion. Every decision is emotionally based. If you look at studies they've done where people have suffered major traumas to the brain and they've damaged the part of the brain that handles emotion, somebody can't make a decision. They've actually done studies where people have had the part of their brain that handles emotion been damaged beyond repair. They will put an orange and a pear in front of them and tell them lunch is served, which would you like? And the person will literally go hungry because they cannot execute upon a decision. So if you want the simple answer, it's emotion. That's a great answer, but that doesn't help us solve anything. I go into my sale and I say, emotion. Okay, emotion. I need to get them emotional. Well, how do I do that? Mm-hmm. That doesn't help us. So the answer to the question is emotion, but it's not helpful to the salespeople watching this podcast. What is helpful to them is imagine if you never have to worry about that. Imagine if you solve for that at the outset of the conversation, and you take your customer along a logic sequence where they're in the driver's seat, they're holding the steering wheel, and you're only progressing the sale once I have your permission. There's a framework. Omar, I'd like you to take you from there to here. I got a few questions for you. Thank you for the answers. Do I have your permission to go here? Yes. This advances the sale. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, great. Omar, now that we're here, we're talking about product, we're talking about buying power. The next thing we generally do, and what most of our customers like to do at this point, is move from there to here. But this gets us closer to buying. Are you okay with that? Okay, so let's move along. Now we're at the precipice, Omar. Now we've solved for time. We've solved for money. We've solved for third party. We've followed the framework completely. And everything you've told me at this point says that you would, that you'd like to engage. So we're all set? And the answer is going to be yes. Now that sounds great on camera, but I promise you, brother, when you engage in Paid to Persuade and you follow the discipline to the T, it takes you there every single time because it's optimized for human beings. There's something that we observe in P2P called the pillars or the pieces of the human condition, okay? And they are as follows. Everybody loves great news. A little knowledge bomb for the salespeople out there. If you're trying to get someone to return a phone call, if you're leaving a voicemail, it's very simple. Hey, Mr. Jones, this is Luke over at CNY Drives. I've actually got some fantastic news for you. I need you to call me back as soon as you're able, 315-555-1212. That's got a 95 to 98% return call rate because you're tickling a part of human emotion that says, even if I don't like that guy, there might be a carrot on the end of that fishing rod. I'm at least going to reach out. There's no harm in making the phone call, right? People love good news. Second thing, people love to feel like they're a part of something. Okay? When you explain to a customer, hey, Omar, that pickup truck you were mentioning, you might wait a day or two, but what most of our customers do is they ABC, and I give you a credible fact that shows you why other people who are suffering from the same pain that you're suffering from have found a solution with the solution that we offer, and the outcome has been they're out of that pain, they've gone through a sequence that's put them in a very happy place, and with a very, very minimal financial investment, I think you might be interested in going down that route as well, and it optimizes for the human condition, and they're going to execute upon that. The last thing is people love to talk about themselves. Bro, if people knew, if they could see on the scientific mapping equipment that I'm not going to even try to say because I'm not well educated enough to know, but when somebody talks about themselves, they undergo, there's an article they did, and I believe it's Family Planning, or there's a parenting magazine, and they did a study, and this study produce the fact that when human beings engage in self-talk, when you start asking me, like right now, obviously, bro, I'm elevated. My dopamine is high. We've done nothing but ask me to unearth information about myself to you this entire podcast. My dopamine is skyrocketed right now. People will watch podcasts with me and say, oh, that drug addict, he's back on drugs again. I'll submit to a blood test, man. It's Red Bull. I had a non-sugar-free one before the episode. But it's the fact that you're asking me questions about myself. You're letting me share with the world information about me that I'm proud of, that I'm interested in, that I like talking about. My dopamine level is through the roof, 40% higher than my free dopamine level. When you can learn how to spike that in a customer, bro, it's like a superpower. It's like being able to wave a magic wand and take their wallet. And I don't mean that in a nefarious way. They're obviously there to engage anyways. 90% of buyers have made their buying decision before they even walk through the threshold of your establishment. Not what they're going to buy, but that they are going to buy. And if you just grab their hand and they like the way that you feel, you move over that line. It's very, very simple to do. People love to talk about themselves. People love to feel like they're a part of something, and people love great news. So when you take all of those metrics and you sew them into your conversation, when you optimize for the big three, when you understand that they don't understand, when you get comfortable being uncomfortable, all the pieces of the P2P selling discipline that we sew into our trainees, brother, you're superhuman.
And when it comes to asking questions, like how important are questions at sort of understanding? Because the quality of our life comes down to the quality of our questions. I think Tony Robbins talks about this concept that thinking is nothing but the process of asking and answering questions in your head. So when it comes to question asking, how much of it is about genuinely caring and understanding versus internally, like essentially when you're training salespeople, what is the sort of guidance for how to get better at asking questions? Because the reality is that that's all a transaction is. That's all a conversation is,
1,000%.
right? Is that process. So the better questions you ask, essentially, with the right mentorship and leadership and guidance, obviously the better quality of life you have, the better quality of sale.
100%.
So what advice do you have for people about how to get better at asking quality questions that lead to more results in life?
Get the information and get educated, because once you understand that there is a framework of questions that when asked will guarantee you a transaction, imagine what happens to your level of interest in asking those questions. Now when you know that these questions are going to solve for a comma and a zero in your paycheck, are they now all of a sudden not the most important questions that you're going to ask this week? Okay, it's completely interwoven, man. We have braided together.
Aligning, yeah.
Bro, when you teach a salesperson a discipline that allows them to know that if they solve this series of compassionate interrogation, these questions that are going to give them the information that they need to close the deal, they become their favorite questions. And the answers to those questions, they become extremely excited about getting. Brother, they did studies, okay? We know who Michael Faraday is. If you don't, look him up. Maybe you could footnote it on the screen, okay? He was a famous scientist, and he created a Faraday cage. It was a room or a cage devoid of all frequencies exiting or entering the room, right? So when you put something, and he would put objects in this cage, and he would study their states and their frequencies of what they emitted if they had energies. They took human beings and they put them in the Faraday cage, and they would measure them in heightened emotional states, anger, romance, whatever. When they put people in there, there was one frequency that measured 4 times higher on the equipment that they measured with, and that was the frequency of authenticity. Authentic conversation. When I'm speaking about something that I'm compassionate about, when I'm telling the truth, when I'm divulging internal information to you, you're actually going to feel it physically, brother.
Yeah.
They talk about frequencies, right? I watched a video recently where a sales trainer was watching another sales trainer. We kind of touched on this, and the guy says, yeah, man, there's frequencies. And imagine if my frequency is the frequency of trying to sell you and close you something, you're going to clam up and your guard's going to go up. But if my frequency is the one of trying to help you solve a problem, your guard's going to go down and you're going to engage. And then this sales trainer, who is, I guess you would call a competitor if you want to use that word, says, yeah, I see what he's talking about here. He's talking about tonality and body language. The tonality and the voice inflection and the body language that you use, that's your frequency. No, sir, it's not. You're conveying the wrong information to your following. That is logically false. What he's referring to, or wishes he was referring to, is the frequency of authenticity. Human beings emit measurable frequencies that can be measured on scientific equipment, oscilloscope if you want to use a dated term, okay? But you can actually see, and they have different waveforms, okay? So if somebody's excited, it's going to look this way. If you're excited, he's excited, she's excited, it's all going to look in a similar waveform, and we can tell that that person is in a state of excitement. Angry, romantic, grieving, loss, whatever, they have waveforms that have a signature, and you can see it and human beings can feel it at a very, very microscopic level. The frequency of authenticity resonates with you physically 4 times harder than anything else I can communicate with you. So when I'm being authentic with you, the frequency that I'm emitting, the frequency of authenticity, you can actually feel it. So when I'm giving you queries and I'm questioning you in a way that's completely authentic and I'm genuinely interested, you're gonna wanna give me the information. You're gonna wanna unearth your objections, your hot buttons, your pain points, because you believe I'm genuinely interested. You wanna know why? Because I am. Maybe not for the reason that you'd like me to be interested, but you're not measuring that. Your body's not measuring that. Your body's measuring the frequency that I'm putting out. Is he sponging it and receiving it? Yes, he is. I'm gonna keep going. And it's just the way human beings function.
Dude, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. I love that. Now, as we wrap up here, I have 2 last questions.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to sales in particular, you know, people see that, you know, the landscape is changing. A lot of people have been burned. You know, there's the expression, oh, used car salesman, right? It has its own sort of life it's taken on.
I've been burned.
Is, you know, how do you see the landscape of sales changing going into the future of industry, right? More and more people are talking about authenticity, more and more people are getting burned. So that's the first question, is how do you see it changing? And then the last question, going back to the moment you decided to change your life in the series of events, it's what advice do you have for people who want to make that shift, who are maybe in a metaphorical or literal jail cell like you once were? So we'll do the first question and then the last one.
Okay, so the first question is what's coming in sales and how to optimize for it?
Yeah, how do you see the landscape of sales changing present day?
I think it's very obvious. I think 2 things are happening. Number 1, AI is entering the marketplace and it's posing a major threat to the salespeople of today, okay? And I'll break that into the second question as well, and I'll do them piece by piece. So to combat the onset of AI, you have to understand something. AI is never gonna resonate the frequency of authenticity, okay? Imagine that. If there is a human transaction that happens that can be felt, no computer can replicate that. So if you learn the paid to persuade discipline, and I'm not trying to throw a shameless pitch here, but if you learn this information and you learn the process of compassionate interrogation and you learn how to spike dopamine and push the frequency of authenticity onto your customer, AI is going to be no match for you. Furthermore, I'm going to predict this right now on this podcast, and I'm glad it's recorded because it'll make me a messiah moving forward, okay? AI is going to go through a bell curve, okay? It's going to enter the marketplace. It already is. You've got Bergerac, you've got Air, you've got all these things that are coming out that people are saying is the next great wave, right? Here's what's going to happen. It's going to work its way into everything but high ticket. High ticket still, people who are going to spend 100, 200 grand, 50 grand, whatever on a product are going to tell they're talking to a robot. I don't care how good the AI gets. It's because of the frequency of authenticity. So AI is going to come on the scene. It's going to replace a lot of salespeople. It's going to replace a lot of auto dialers, bots, calls, all that stuff. It's going to basically create ease of transaction for the business owner, okay? But what's gonna happen is the customer is ultimately gonna start identifying the fact that they're being sold by a machine, and they're gonna disengage. And what's gonna happen is, at large, people are gonna become very cautious to even get on the phone with anybody because they're not gonna know if it's AI, they're not gonna know. So we're gonna go to a world where either A, it's e-com only, and they're only gonna buy something if they can point, click, see it, and get it sent, or they're gonna go to in-person only. They're not gonna wanna hover in that AI place. And e-com can't do things like sell a coaching program. You can't just go see a VSL and read a paragraph and want to spend 150 grand. You better have Russell Brunson himself writing that, okay? It's just not going to happen. So AI is going to go through a bell curve. How you weather the storm is you learn a discipline that allows you to engage authentically and be perfectly confident in every transaction and every conversation, because eventually, as it brings itself back around, you're going to be positioned very, very well to pick up all those spots that'll be left open, okay? The second thing, as far as the onset of AI, is this ecosystem where there are setters and closers, okay? So there are always going to be places that setters and closers are necessary, and it's going to be in tremendously high volume, in places where the sale is disjointed, where the setting of the appointment and the onset of the call and the actual sale of the product or service are 2 completely different things. That's always been that way. That's always going to be that way. But the companies and the industries that have optimized for going from a full cycle salesperson, somebody who can meet you, build rapport, take you start to finish, that have gone to that setter closer relationship, get one guy, incentivize him a smaller percentage, percentage fractional to get a Calendly booked and then put them on the phone with one of our wolves who can shut them down, one of our sharks. That landscape is going to change tremendously. It already is, okay? And I'm calling it out right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that over the course of the next, let's say 3 to 5 years, the whole setter-closer relationship is going to diminish almost completely to where it only still lives in the places that it's always lived. The way you weather that storm, the way you position yourself against that as a salesperson is you learn full cycle sales. You learn how to build a pipeline. You learn how to put customers into your funnel. You learn how to cultivate relationships. You build a personal brand. You leverage relationships with vendors and people in other industries or other parallels that can feed into your respective industry. You build a reputation. And you learn to take your customer from the point of inception all the way through the sale to the close, throughout referral, follow-up, and the nurture sequence until they re-engage. If you can do that yourself, there's no way you're making less than $250,000.
Yeah, well said. And AI would only help support that. The tools would only help support it.
And that's another thing, just briefly, the salesperson who can learn to coexist with AI and not just not hate it, but actually use it to augment the process. Do you know how many times I go to ChatGPT and I say, hey, Andre, we're going to film some content on the way over to Omar's podcast. ChatGPT, if I was going to interview a sales trainer who was disrupting the marketplace, what are 20 things I would ask him? Please create me a list. Okay, that saves a half an hour of my time of having to do it myself. Right. That doesn't mean I'm relying on AI. That means I'm using AI to augment my process, to optimize for efficiency so I can get more done in a day. And I think if the salespeople of the world start to use AI tools to augment their daily process, they're going to be invincible.
Well said. Well said. And nothing in this world changes or shifts or moves or grows till something is bought or sold. So they're the backbone of this country and this world. Last question before I wrap up. You know, you've done some amazing things.
Thank you,
have
brother.
some humongous, ambitious goals, and you're helping so many salespeople all over the country, all over the world. With the Paid to Persuade program, your books, I know you're creating content online. People can find you there. But what advice do you have for people, and I mentioned this earlier, who are maybe in their rock bottom situation that you were once, right? Whether it be the drugs, whether it be a metaphorical or literal jail cell, whether it be someone who maybe is a beginning salesperson who's stuck in a really tough place, right? We've all been in moments where you're in your rock bottom and it's just you and your head in a hard place. What advice would you have to the younger Lukes, so to speak, who are in that place, wanting to get out, wanting to change your life, being on this side of the fence? What advice would you give them?
Brother, the first and foremost thing I would say to them is there is no such thing as failure if you keep moving. It's only a failure if it keeps you down. Something is going to happen in your life eventually. I don't care if you're riding on cloud 9 right now, you're running through a sequence of successes that have done nothing but put you on an uphill trajectory, an upward trajectory since your childhood. It's coming. That fall is coming. When it comes, how you handle it determines who you are as a human being. I say luckily. At the time, I would have said unfortunately, but in hindsight, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I experienced a tremendous amount of negatives early on in my life. The way I look at that now, thank God I found out I was an addictive personality before I had my son. Thank God I cheated on all the women that I met and was a piece of crap back then before I met my lovely wife, Nikki, who is the rock of my life, and I wouldn't exist without her. Thank God, excuse me. Thank God that I went through all that trauma back then, because now I can help those Lukes that are seeking that good uncle that need that information, okay? Number 2, not to sound cliche, man, but knowledge is power. And I don't mean watch Reading Rainbow and go buy a book. I mean go to people that know what you want to know, that have elevated themselves to the planes that you want to operate, and go to them. And don't just go to them and ask questions. Exchange value, okay? I won't name names, but there was another sales guy that I'm kind of fond of, and I wanted to iterate with him. Hey man, I got these thoughts. What do you think of this? You know, he's been in the game longer than me, and I truly want to help people, and it looks like he's doing it successfully. So I shot him a DM, and I was like, hey man, you know, I like what you're doing. I think that where you've come from and where you've gotten to is kind of similar to my story. I'm not putting us together. I'm just saying I think maybe I know some things that you know, and I've been some places that you have been. I'd like to exchange some value with you. I'd like to have a conversation. I think you would like how it ends up. Let me know if you'd be willing to hop on a call. He responds with, man, I get pitches every single day. You're just like the rest of them. Just freaking send me an email. If it's something I'm interested, I'll let you know. And I said, bro, I got nothing to sell you, okay? I'm just a guy who believes that when two people get together and network, that something magical can happen, because it has been the framework of my success in this new period of my life. Here's what I can tell you. If you get on the call with me and you're not happy with how it goes, There's 2 conditions. Number 1, I promise you I won't sell you anything. But the second condition is after the call is over and you believe your time has been wasted, I will pay $5,000 to a charity of your choice. So what's that do? If he's an asshole and he doesn't care about charity, then I don't want to know him anyways. But if he's a good guy like I think he is, he's going to say to himself, well, goddamn, this guy's so sure that he's going to bring me value that if he doesn't, I'm going to be able to, in my name, donate $5,000 to a charity I believe in. It almost implies it's a failsafe. This guy is worth the hour because he would not be offering this up unless he was absolutely sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he's going to bring me value. Yeah. So offer them value. Don't just say, hey man, what can I take from you? What can I suck off you to help me improve? Hey man, can I paint your house? And maybe you teach me a little bit about house painting. Hey man, could you do me a favor? I'll do brakes. I heard your car needs brakes. I'll do brakes on your car if you just teach me how to build a decal vinyl printing company like you have. Like, exchange of value. It's what makes the world go around. It's why you and I are sitting here today. Yeah. So go to the people that are doing what you want to do. The people in the gym, Big Luke, how'd you get those arms? How'd you do this? How'd you do that? Like, I respect those people because they ask me how I got this way and they want to look this way. The people that I can't stand are the ones that look at me and say, hey man, what type of peptides do you run? What type of cycle are you on? And I say, listen man, there's a lot more to it than that. Yeah, whatever bro, I read on bodybuilding.com that blah 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 and so said da da da. It's like, okay, does bodybuilding.com look how you want to look? Did you actually look at the avatar or the picture of the writer who wrote that article? Yeah, he's a skinny guy that watches Formula 1 races on the weekend, right? Yeah. Ask the people that have what you want to have how to get what they have and offer them a value exchange, because nobody wants to give you information for free, especially if they're successful. But when you offer to exchange value, it kind of throws up this indicator in their head that says, okay, this person understands the game, right?
He's convicted, yeah.
Exactly. He's willing to give in order to receive.
Yeah, and on the point of persuasion, you cannot transfer that which you're not experiencing. So when you're experiencing that conviction, they feel that. And that's where you're different than everybody else who's asking for free lunch or free call or free whatever. Let me ask you this before we wrap up, and people can find out more about you. When Luke Lunkenheimer is nothing, dead gone and nothing but a pile of dust, what do you hope that your legacy and your story is all about?
That I changed the landscape of selling forever. That I made it easy for people. That I was the guy that effed up so royally and got so far in the dirt, but came back and created this amazing mindset and sales training that changed the landscape of the world, because it helped customers, because they are now communicated with authentically and their process moves along quicker, so they're happy about it. And it helps the salespeople and it helps the business owners because they have a team of assassins that they can leverage to unbelievable gains in business. Every car dealership in the world is slow right now. CNY Drives is busier than my service department can handle. Why? Because people flood like a swarm of hornets to our dealerships because the process is simple and the salespeople are so freaking effective and the word has gotten out. I want to be the guy that changes the face of selling forever and everybody remembers as that guy that showed us all how to really do it.
I love it, man. And where can people find you if they want to learn more, connect with you, or learn about Paid to Persuade, find you on social media?
100%, bro. So there's paidtopersuade.com. There's some podcasts on there. There's some links. You can actually book a call with me directly. There's my social medias. I'm at Luke Lunk. That's LUKELUNK. I'm pretty much everything. Instagram, all the meta, TikTok. Paid to Persuade is our YouTube channel. That's a work in progress, but it's nonetheless, it's got value there, mostly short form, but we're building in some long form cadence there as well. But pretty much everywhere it's at Luke Lunk or paidtopersuade.com.
Awesome.
And anybody that watches this podcast that reaches out to me and lets me know that they saw me on this podcast is going to be very pleased with the offer that they get.
Awesome, my man. And we'll go ahead and plug those links in the description down below. Luke, thank you so much.
Can I just say one thing, bro?
Absolutely,
okay, very so. We are the only sales training company that guarantees efficacy, meaning if we do not get you the monetary result that we claim, we refund you 100% in total. I just wanted to make sure that was on the pod.
Yeah, bro, absolutely.
Thanks for having me, dude.
I appreciate
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for changing the paradigm for sales, and we'll definitely be sending more people your way, brother. I appreciate
you, man. This was a blast.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to follow Luke and check out Paid to Persuade, as well as all of his social medias for free content and free training weekly in the description down below. As always, live strong, live with passion, and go make those dreams a reality. We'll see you guys on the next episode.